You're listening to the Joel Martin Mastery Podcast, home of the 2-hour deep dive interview with gold, platinum, and multi-platinum bands, including Stained, Blue Rodeo, The Arkells, Finger 11, Big Wreck, Moist, Bedouin Soundclash, I Mother Earth, Ill Scarlet, Neverending White Lights, Thornley, and many more. Please take a moment to subscribe to the podcast, as well as share, comment, and like. Now let's dive in to today's episode. Welcome, everyone, to today's episode of the podcast. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. We are joined by a very special guest. He was the co-lead vocalist and guitarist for the platinum-selling and 5-time Juno-nominated band Treble Charger. He's also been a part of Broken Social Scene, Don Vale, the Priddle Concern, and his new project, Pointless. So welcome to the podcast, Bill Priddle. Bill, how are you? And how good does it feel to be writing and recording new music in 2022?
Thanks, Joel. I'm good. It feels my band Pointless is a bit of it kind of solved a writer's block for me. I kind of didn't write anything for the longest time, so it's been gratifying.
Is the music just kind of flowing now, or is it just slow and steady, but better than writer's block?
I was reading an interview with Stephen Malkmus from the band Pavement, and this was quite a while ago when he was well into his solo career. And he said, yeah, when I was young in Pavement, I used to write all the time. But now, there's families and kids and fantasy football. And I just don't have I just don't devote all my time to it anymore. So I'm kind of in the same boat. It happens when it happens, but things don't come super easily like they did, it seems.
I hear you. Has the writer's block mostly been during the length of the pandemic?
No, quite before that. Basically from like 2007 to about 5 years ago.
Okay. Yeah, I hear that the best thing to do as a writer, whether it's for books or for music, is to show up at the same place every day, like it's, not waiting for inspiration, but like it's your job, it's your career. Every day you sit down from, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. and you just write, whether it's good, whether it's bad, whether it's one line or a song or a chapter. And I guess it's putting yourself in place that whenever inspiration does hit, you're there with the pen to pad. Is there any truth behind any of that, or is that nonsense I read?
I don't know. For me, it was more of a situational thing, because as a working musician, you get into a pattern. You write songs, and then you work on the songs, then you record them, and then the album comes out, and you tour, and then the tour slows down, and you start writing more songs. And after the Priddle Concern came out, that kind of broke the cycle, because the album wasn't a huge success, and there was no touring, and it broke the cycle. And then it just coincided with I split up from my wife, and so I shared custody of our kid, and I was working as a cook and taking care of my kid, so that took kind of all my time.
Yeah, sometimes life takes over, where you think,
Yep.
me sitting down and writing a song, maybe that's not the most important thing when there's a kid that needs your attention, there's bills that need to be paid.
Yeah.
Isn't it great to be young and just working on music, just that freedom of it's the only thing that matters and there's no responsibilities. There's a beauty to that period of time.
Absolutely. Yeah.
If only we had a time machine, I suppose.
Yeah.
So speaking of time machines, we're going to do a 2-hour deep dive. We're going to go through your entire career, through your entire discography, across all your projects. So we have to take a time machine and go all the way back to the beginning. So you're clearly passionate about music. Where did this love of music come from? And is there maybe an earliest musical memory that jumps out at you?
I would say, people always ask, who's your biggest musical influence? And I think I guess the Beatles, because that was, then I think about other acts, but really I would say my musical influence is my father. He was not a musician, but he was a big music fan, and we always had a stereo and albums, and he made and he always had a reel-to-reel tape deck, and he made mixtapes. And he knew someone at the radio station, so he would borrow singles a lot. And so I grew up listening to these mixtapes, and if back then you couldn't get better. It's not like we had a gazillion-dollar stereo, but when you have a half decent turntable and you record it onto quarter-inch tape at 3 3/4, you get this beautiful tape compression, so everything sounds amazing. So I just grew up listening to music all the time. Greg Norrie and I, we've known each other since we were infants. Our parents used to share a ski chalet, and Greg and I used to, when we were 7 or 8 years old, we used to sleep in the same bed, and it was very thin walls, and we were right above the stereo. So we basically go to sleep listening to this same music, a lot of CCR, a lot of Beatles, kind of early country, kind of early 70s singer-songwriter stuff.
Your dad was making mixtapes before it was easy to make mixtapes with CD.
Exactly.
He's a pioneer in that field. So you mentioned some of the artists you heard, the Beatles, your parents would play CCR, some of the country stuff. Is there any other of that early music that jumped out to you when you were a kid?
There was one particular mixtape, and it had a whole bunch of great songs on it, and it had Heart of Gold on it by Neil Young. And I remember thinking, because I didn't like country when I was a kid, so I didn't like that sound of that country steel guitar. But on Heart of Gold, there was something about it. I remember thinking, like, what is this sound? What is going on? It kind of filled my head, and it was kind of like, what is going on? I don't understand what's going on, but it's amazing.
Yeah, but it's a little less country, a little more folky, a little more pop elements to it. Yeah.
And I think like so many people around my age, I was a Beatles fanatic when I was 8, 9, 10, 11 years old. So that was kind of my whole world.
And what do you think it was about the Beatles? I mean, obviously they have some of the greatest songs of all time. Is it the harmonies? Is it the look? What is it about the Beatles that you remember?
Oh, I think it's the Beatles just made great records. They made great recordings. The songs were great. The singers were great. It was everything.
They were the full package.
The full package.
So that was you becoming a fan of music, but how did you become a musician? So how did you gravitate towards the guitar? And then I'm assuming singing came later than the guitar. That's usually what happens.
Yeah. When I was about 8 or 9, my parents said, "Do you want to learn an instrument?" And I said, "Yeah, I want to learn the guitar." So they bought me a really cheap guitar, and I took classical guitar lessons for years with this guy called Dennis McGregor here in Sault Ste. Marie. And I was not very good. I was really good at sight reading and reading music, but I was not good at practicing. I was not into classical music. And I didn't start singing till I was probably 16 or 17 or 18. And the first rock band I was in high school was terrible, and I was awful. Yet I'm a late bloomer.
Did you enjoy those guitar lessons, or not so much because it was classical?
Yeah, I did. I don't remember looking forward to them. I do remember. I would go to summer camp, and a counselor one year was playing Stairway to Heaven on his acoustic guitar. And I looked at that and I thought, what is going on? Well, how is that even possible? And I remember my guitar teacher gave me the sheet music to Stairway to Heaven. I was like, what? Like a mortal can play this?
That's awesome. Yeah, Stairway to Heaven is like a gateway drug for most guitarists in the beginning, for sure.
And it seemed like when I was a kid, any kind of I have these strong memories of seeing someone playing. Like I think the first time I saw someone, playing electric guitar, not seeing a band, but I think he was playing a BTO song, and he was playing the chords, and I was like, how are you doing that? Like it sounds just like the record. I mean, it probably didn't, but to me, it just sounded like how is that possible?
Did he have distortion going and everything?
I don't even think that much distortion, just like the sound of electric guitar right beside you, just like, whoa.
When you started singing, did you have the first few moments where you're already playing guitar and you decide, you know what, I want to try being a singer, and you realize you can't play guitar and sing at the same time? Like it's two different parts of the brain that need to be separated at first. Did you get that at all?
I didn't have that much problem with that. I did have that exactly with harmonica. I used to be a ski racer, and I was not very good, but I hung around people that were good, that were on the Northern Ontario division.
Sorry, I have to say that's something that's dangerous to not be good at. Is yeah.
Well, I don't think I was fast enough to be dangerous. You know how people, they hit the poles and the poles go rattle. I never hit a pole in my life.
That's funny. That's funny.
So one of the Northern Ontario division guys was John Critchley. And when these guys would come into town, we would all hang out. So we were hanging out at someone's ski chalet, and John had his guitar and a harmonica, and he was singing and playing harmonica. And I remember thinking to myself, I gotta get moving here. Like he's singing and playing harmonica. I gotta do that. So I remember I got a harmonica with a rack, and I would spend all day playing Heart of Gold on the harmonica with the rack, and just like you said, sat down, played the guitar, and then it was like my hands exploded. I could not multitask.
Was Neil, so you mentioned Heart of Gold. So was it Neil Young and maybe Bob Dylan that got you interested in the harmonica?
Yeah, I would say, yeah.
And your friend?
I wasn't into Dylan yet, but I would say Neil Young taught me how to sing, and that's partly why I kind of sound like Neil Young. I think it's physiology as well. But
you mentioned that when you first started, you were in a band and you weren't great. What was the name of that band? And were you in a bunch of bands before Trouble Charger?
Yeah, we had a cover band in high school called Ziggy Freud. It was not a good band. I think we only had one or two gigs. Then we kind of, that was kind of a rock band. Then we had more of a like Southern rock, rootsy country rock band called East Side, I think.
These are good band names so far.
And then Greg and I started just playing the two of us acoustically. We'd do a lot of like Simon and Garfunkel and Neil Young and stuff with harmonies in it.
Look at that. We got a little a show. We always end up with cats and dogs on the show. So what's your cat's name? Just so we're all
her name is Tiny Kitten.
Tiny Kitten? Yeah. That is a solid name. You're as good as naming your animals as you are at naming bands. So
thank you.
That's funny. So you mentioned along the way you ended up performing covers with Greg, and that you've known him since you were really young. At what point was there an idea that we should start a band together and do original songs?
It was the late 80s when we both kind of like flamed out of university, and I decided, okay, music is what I want to do. And then I moved. Greg had gone to school in Windsor, and he knew a guitar player, and he was in a band. So I joined that band, became the bass player. And after about 6 or 9 months, the guitar player decided that he wanted to focus on directing. He became probably still doing it now. He became like a kids' TV director. And I said to Greg, let's go to Toronto and start our own band. And then we moved to Toronto and started up a band called Warehouse. Not a good name. And we did the smartest thing, and I recommend this to any band starting out. We recorded an album in Greg's roommate's room with a I guess a half-inch Tascam 8-track or 16-track. I think I did all the engineering. We recorded it. We mixed it. I don't know if we mastered it. I guess we mastered it, and we made cassette tapes, and we listened to it, and we thought, this is terrible. And we didn't do anything with it. And so as a result, the next batch of songs we did were with NC-17 and then subsequently Treble Charger. So I think a lot of people were like, wow, where did these guys come from with these songs? Well, the reason is you didn't hear our terrible songs.
Basically, by the time you made a legit recording, it was almost like a greatest hits. You had already gone through the other stuff.
Well, yeah, the other stuff was gone, was just gone. Like we did not, none of those songs lasted. We just wrote new, better songs.
Is that original recording that you think is terrible? Does that exist anywhere, or did you guys like dumpster fire that thing quickly?
Greg might have it. I know I don't have it, because back then it was, your master was on a VHS tape.
Technology.
Yep.
So you talked about growing up in Sault Ste. Marie. How much do you think that influenced who you became as a person and who you became as a musician? Is there something unique about Sault Ste. Marie?
I don't know. It's a very isolated small city. It's, Sudbury is pretty worldly because it's only, 2.5, 3 hours to Toronto from Sudbury. But this is another 3 hours or so west of Sudbury. It's very backwards. You talk to any bands from the 90s, you never stopped here. We never stopped. We were from here. We never stopped here. There's never been any Canadian rock radio. There's never been any Canadian college radio. So the Canadian music scene didn't really exist here. It's like the Trews are coming. I was mentioning someone like the Trews, and they were like, who are the Trews? Like, it's just very, yeah.
So when bands are planning out their Canadian tour dates, Sault Ste. Marie isn't up there with Toronto or Vancouver or Montreal.
No, absolutely not. I right before Treble Chart, the last job I had before being a full-time musician was I used to I was an assistant to a graphic designer. I used to design what was then MCA Concerts Now magazine lineup, and so I would get all these tour dates all the time, and it would consistently be Sudbury, Thunder Bay, Sudbury, Thunder Bay, Sudbury, Thunder Bay, never the Sioux.
Sault Ste. Marie is the city that fun forgot. That's what they say about Ottawa. I've heard an Ottawa radio DJ say that before. The city that fun forgot. You talked about doing some graphic design. What are some of the other jobs that you had before becoming a professional musician? Any really memorable ones or any terrible ones? Just so we know you're human and you had to go through the trenches like the rest of us.
Yeah, I worked, believe it or not, at a phone sex company. Back before there was like, people would call the number in a magazine, and I would pick up and say, give me your credit card information. I would check their credit card, and it was not a fun job. And you would work like midnight to noon shifts. It was brutal.
Was there anything special in your resume that got you hired there?
No, you didn't need anything. It'd be like, have a pulse.
There, yeah.
Somehow I got this job as a assistant to a science writers group. So I ran this journalism contest. Yeah.
These are some exciting jobs.
And
no wonder you turned to music with so much passion.
Yeah. And, bartender, server, that kind of thing.
And as a kid in Sault Ste. Marie, was there anything you wanted to be growing up before you fell in love with music?
No, I probably, from an early age, I wanted to be a musician. I had my stage name all Elliot Black. It's not a bad stage name. Yeah,
you're good at the naming of bands. If ever I start another band, I'm coming to you for a name.
All right.
So. If we happened to be friends when you were 16 and you invited me over to listen to some music, what albums would you be spinning for me?
Okay, 16. I'm gonna say Hotel California. Uh,
Nice.
Probably heavy rotation would be Cheap Trick, Heaven Tonight. Um, Probably any 70s Steely Dan. So probably Asia and the Royal Scam. Uh, Probably some Joe Walsh, uh, Rolling Stones.
Man, there's good music during that period of time. Not all eras of music are the same. We can agree.
Well, I'm really old. We were always like sensitive about our age because all our indie rock peers were all about 5 or 6 years younger than us. So I'm old enough to remember when music started to die in the early 80s, and you started to notice, wow, there's not a lot of good songs on the top 40, and it just went down consistently downhill from there.
What do you think was the catalyst for the all-time great music kind of dying off?
This is one of my favorite subjects. I feel like it was a perfect storm at the end of the 70s. Um, we had a briefly we had a one of the coolest guys I've ever met, an American booking agent. Um, and we went to we were in LA, and we went to his place in the hills for dinner, and he had what he called the only good New York style pizza in LA. And he told us the history of what had gone wrong in the music business. And he talked about, I think maybe he might have used the example of Joni Mitchell. You're Asylum Records, and you signed Joni Mitchell in, I don't know, 69 or 68, 69, 70. And you know that the first album's going to lose money, and the second album's going to lose money, and the third album might break even. And after that, through your careful development of this artist, you're going to start making money, which is exactly what happened with Joni and so many others. And he said that kind of long-term thinking, it went from 10 years to 5 years to 2 years to 1 year to quarterly to, at the time, daily stock prices. Mm. So you had that, you had the corporatization of music. So you had no more radio DJs playing what they wanted. Advertisers wanted a very tight playlist. So you were only listening to this much music. Then you had the advent of video. So the music wasn't the only important thing. You had to be good looking too. So that watered down things as well. And then the fact that in the late 70s and early 80s, gear got terrible. The new digital gear, and everyone was like on drum machines, and then add to that pot a little cocaine, and you have like the recipe for destroying music.
I think that's a good synopsis of what went down. But yeah, no, there's a lot of artists that it took them 3-4 albums of development where the label had long-term vision. I know Bon Jovi, it took several albums. Springsteen took several albums. A little bit newer, but Kid Rock, it was like his, I don't know, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th album before he had the big one. So I guess it feels like these days it's all the development has to be done before the label becomes involved. Like a label basically looks at a band and sees that they're already selling tickets. They already have millions of followers, and it's just money. They go, okay, well, they've done this well on their own. If we put this much money times the current fan base, it should make it's a formula.
Exactly. Other than someone seeing some kids sing and thinking, wow, you can sort of sing and you're incredibly good looking.
That's another formula.
Need to be a finished product and have your own audience already in place.
And things are a little different now. I guess back before the Beatles, it was all about just singles, not albums. And then the Beatles, from my understanding, are the first artists that had so much good music that they could put out a full album that was worth buying. And since the Beatles, it's been all about albums and not singles. And then since, the digital downloads and the streaming and Napster and iTunes, we've gone back to a
Yeah.
singles market. Is that accurate? Is it more singles now? And bands seem to be releasing singles and EPs instead of
Yeah,
albums.
I think so. I'm no expert in the music business at present. That's never been my thing. I'm just about music, so I try not to think about all the business side of things to my detriment. But
Yeah, an example. I just had the drummer for Big Wreck on, so his name's Sekou, and they finished recording a 15-song album. So the album will be called Big Wreck 7. And what they did, because of the way the industry is now, is they divided that into 3 EPs that they're releasing every few months. So there's
I see.
7.1 and there's a single, and it's like people can focus on just those 5
Nice.
songs.
Yep. Yep. No, that's a
So that
smart way
that
to
that's
do it.
what they're doing, and it seems to be kind of a reflection of what's going on. And instead of 15 songs coming out today, and then 4 months later there's nothing for a year or two, it's like every 5 months a new product comes out, but over time it's the same amount of songs. I guess that's the thought
Yeah.
behind it now. It's very, very, very different. How early on as a musician did you know that you had something special, that you actually had a talent that you could maybe get paid for, that somehow if you worked hard, you could turn this into a career?
I don't think it was until we started recording the NC-17 record, and I don't remember whether we finished. We recorded all the songs, but we had a 3-song cassette, and then with that got us a manager, and it was around that time. It was around that time, and I was working so hard in the studio, and I just remember thinking that this is going to work. I'm going to make this work. We're doing good stuff here. Like, I didn't have that feeling when we made that first album that we scrapped, as I said. But and the engineer Rob Sanzo, his reaction as well. I remember we were listening to a rough mix of Red, and I remember him thinking, like, if this isn't really successful, then I don't know anything about music.
It's nice from the start where you said, you're not great, you're in bands, you're not great, you make that first recording, it doesn't sound great. It must feel nice then at that point to have people outside of the band actually saying how good something is, and that there's something there that must make you feel pretty good.
Yeah, definitely. And I read something a little while ago about someone pointing out the fact that successful artists need to have good taste, so they need to be able to push through the point where they're making something that they know isn't very good. So, if you're clueless and you think everything you do is great, then you're not going to go far. But if you have really good taste and you think, oh, this is terrible, I should quit, you're not going to go far. So it's that sweet spot of like pushing through. I think I can do better. I think I can do better. And then you think, okay, yeah, no, I like this. This is good.
Did you ever deal with resistance from family or friends early on? A lot of times musicians were told, just get that good job, get the education, career in the music industry. That's a pipe dream. Did you have resistance, and how were
Oh,
you able
yeah.
to deal with that resistance?
Well, I remember specifically visiting Sault Ste. Marie and talking with my dad. We were outside somewhere, and I was saying just what you were talking about. I was just at that stage where I'm pretty sure this is going to be successful. No one really knows who we are. We haven't sold anything or done any big gigs, but I'm pretty sure. And I was explaining to him, I think I'm going to make this work. And he was literally walking away from me because he thought this was just, he was a lawyer. He thought I should be an accountant. And he thought this was just, ridiculous. And it took him about 3 or 4 years to come around when we were sort of on the cover of Maclean's magazine. There was a big cover story about the renaissance of Canadian music, and there was like a maple leaf collage of band photos, and our photo was on. So we were, we were not by ourselves on the cover of Maclean's, but we were. So at that point, my dad was, oh, my son, the rock star.
Who else do you remember being on that cover? Probably Our Lady Peace or Moist or
Yeah, probably Tragically Hip.
how dare I not start with Tragically Hip?
Probably Sloan. Yeah,
The glory days.
Gee, I do not remember.
Yeah, as I talk to more and more bands and artists on this podcast, almost all of them, it took something major like a magazine cover, a Juno nomination, a Grammy nomination for the family to come around, because that's like, it's undeniable at that point.
Yeah.
So apparently you have two nicknames. This is what Wikipedia tells me, and Wikipedia isn't always correct, but Pedal Freak and the Priddler. So when were those bestowed upon you, and how did they come to be?
Pedal Freak is one of those Wikipedia things. No one has ever called me Pedal Freak. Yes, I love guitar pedals, but name me one guitar player that doesn't.
So
Priddler,
that's not really a thing, Pedal Freak?
That is absolutely not a thing.
I wonder which one individual person went in and updated Wikipedia with that. That's funny.
Who knows? The Priddler, I'm going to say that's kind of 2000s. I think when I was living in Dunville, when I met Mitch from Don Vale, I think it was those guys that started calling me the Priddler, possibly.
That was a little more self-explanatory, I suppose. Yeah. So as we transition now into the start of Treble Charger, so we have talked about it a little bit. You knew Greg growing up, and then with mutual friends, you form a band. So the band was originally called NC-17, and there happened to be one or more bands that already had that name. I guess they threatened some legal stuff, and you changed the name. So how did the name NC-17? How did that start? And then where did the transition to Treble Charger come from?
I don't remember how we got NC-17. I just remember someone came up with it, and everyone thought, well, this is a good name.
And that's from the movies, right? That's like the classification of movies.
And it also was like almost the Star Wars, the Star Trek, I think it's NCC something with a 1 and a 7. So we thought, oh, this is like hitting on all levels here. Then we this hair band from California, they sent a letter from a lawyer's office, and we thought, oh, and our manager was like, oh, this is bad, you got to change your name. And I remember I think it was early 1994, and we had a deadline because we were going to be the first band at the Molson Park Tragically Hip July 1st show. So we had like X days to come up with a name to go on the poster. And I came up with Treble, and Greg came up with Charger. And I stole Treble from the band Pavement again. Their publishing company was called Treble Sands. And I thought, Treble, that's good. Yeah, Treble something, that's good.
And then Charger from Greg. So you guys are collaborating right from the start, 50-50. So I like that. So in 1994, you guys release your debut album, NC-17. So this is named after the original band name, I guess, kind of in honor of the name that was taken from you. 2 singles. So there was Red, the original version of Red, and then 10th Grade Love. So it was released independently at first by a label called Smoking Worm. How did you attract the attention of that label? Was it just your building?
Oh, no, that's just us.
Oh, that's you guys. Okay, self-released.
Because I drew this. I don't know if you have any images of the Smoking Worm or the Smoking Worm with an apostrophe. It was like this kind of dragon-like character that I drew, cartoon with a martini glass and a cigarette. And that was the 3-song tape. That was the cover. And we had shirts made up like that. Um, yeah, and then we were playing at the El Macombo, and this band called Tristan Psionic was opening up for us. And I was talking to the guitar player Sandy after both our sets, and I said, like, "Well, you guys are great. Like we play a lot of shows, and usually the bands we play with are terrible, and you guys are really good." And he said, "Yeah, same with us. Usually bands we play with are terrible. You guys are really good." And then we became on Sonic, their label Sonic Onion.
Okay. And what thoughts, memories, emotions come back when you think to that debut album that kickstarted this wild journey?
Yeah, I don't really remember any I don't remember the day that I had the CD in my hand. I remember more like recording it and being in the studio and just being I didn't have the best work ethic growing up. And when I got into that studio, it was like, okay, Rob, we can go another hour. No, Bill, it's 3 a.m. No, we can go another hour. And so it was just very, very satisfying for me. And yeah, and then we just started playing more, and it was just, it was a great time.
So you found out that your work ethic or your lack of work ethic was just directly tied to whether there was something you were passionate about.
Exactly.
Did it mean a lot to you to know that, oh, I do have work ethic, I just haven't found something that's worth working towards?
Absolutely. And then, it went back to like, I mean, I did pretty well in school, but I remember like not doing homework in order to like learn a guitar solo, but badly. But, I was always like up for spending a lot of time listening to, arranging harmonies or learning chords.
So you guys released this album. What opportunities presented themselves now that you physically had something that could promote the band outside of just people that happen to catch you at a live show?
Well, like I said, that Tragically Hip show, which was, and for us, we never played a festival before, and the Molson Park backstage, like, it was paradise. There was free pinball games.
That's how you know
you've outside. There was lots of food. We got like a case of beer, and we were hanging around talking to other musicians. You probably don't know this about me, but I've known the Tragically Hips. I saw their second gig.
Their second gig.
I would have met Gord Downey, I think, at the end of my first year or second year of university. And it's funny because I just saw Tom Wilson was just here a couple weeks ago, and he did a reading from his book, and it was all about the Tragically Hip. And this was so awesome to me to hear what he was talking about, because he was just describing what I, say, just absolutely nailing what they were doing, that they were really enthusiastic, that he had them play a set. He said they played all these like obscure mid-60s Stones albums. They played Off the Hook. Who plays Off the Hook? I'm like, yes. I'm a big fan of the 1965 Rolling Stones, like albums like Now and Out of Our Head, because Gord lent them to me and I taped them. And I think, like, if it hadn't been for the second guitar player, Paul, if he hadn't been one of their buddies, I probably could have joined the Tragically Hip. It's not outside the realm of possibility. I remember jamming with them once after a gig, and first time I ever played it like a real guitar. And yeah, those early shows were amazing. Like I said, they didn't do any hits. They just did transformed. They used to do this Yardbird song called Here It Is. And I remember just thinking like things were exploding. And later I listened to the version, the Yardbirds version. I'm like, that's not what I heard. Like they just seemed to transform everything. and Gord was, pretty riveting right from the start.
The first show I ever saw was my parents brought me to see the Tragically Hip with Sheryl Crow and Ashley McIsaac. So this was, I think it was another roadside attraction. I was so young that I remember just asking for pizza. Like that's all I wanted at this concert. I didn't know what was going on. But so maybe that's what kickstarted my lifelong love of music, was having, just by osmosis, having the hip,
Yep.
being in that
Yep.
presence. Did you end up staying in touch with the members of the hip over the years as Treble Charger blew up and the hip maintained that success?
Yeah, but mostly Gord. Yeah, in the early '90s, I hung out with Gord a fair amount. We were both living pretty close by in the West End of Toronto. He had this place on College Street with his wife. They had no kids then. I used to hang out there a lot. Josh Finlayson from Skydiggers was there a lot. Yeah, it was good. Gord is an awesome guy, and I remember thinking that the last time I talked to him, I remember thinking that our conversations together were like a chess match, only in a fun, non-stressful way. We were just both trying to kind of out wordsmith each other.
Has it meant a lot to you to see the outpouring of love and support, when he passes away, that all of Canada and the world, it just showed so much love and just embraced him, and
yeah,
it was like a celebration of his life as much as you could,
Yeah, and Gord was a very special guy. He was just the ultimate sweetheart. I always describe him to people as saying that if you had a chance to have a 10-minute talk with Gord, that 10 minutes would be you talking about yourself, because that's the kind of guy Gord was. He would ask you he would find common ground, and he would talk about you, not him.
As we transition into the 1995 self-titled album, I have some kind words sent in here. This is from someone that mastered both of those albums. So NC-17 and self-titled. This is Joao Carvalho, who's one of the best. His bio has like 2,000 albums he's worked on, and he's come up in a different interview with some bands I've interviewed here. So this is what he has to say. He says, Bill Priddle, the conscience of Treble Charger, the Lennon of Treble Charger. Truly underrated, amazing guitarist. I mastered the first 2 records. At the time, they were such a phenomenon. Really highly regarded in the indie community. All the rage. It really made my mastering career in the indie scene take off after working on those records. Working with those guys really did have a sense of working with the Canadian version of the Beatles, with Bill and Greg fronting their own blend of pop feeding off of each other. Rosie, the bassist, was also an excellent player and collaborator. I really admire Bill all these years. A real understated talent, but always very recognizable. So that's Joao Carvalho.
Wow, that's very sweet of him.
There you go. He's reminiscing about the past. So the self-titled album in 95, 3 singles, Even Grable, Morale, and Sick Friend Called. So there's a top 6 single. There's a top 16 single. What was it like hearing your songs on the radio for the first time? So maybe you heard songs on the radio from the previous album, but do you remember what it's like? Just those songs pop up.
I vaguely remember it was nice, but it was never a big thing for me. I've always been a guy that for me, making music is for me. So for me, it's more, I remember more recording those things and working on those things than hearing them on the radio. That was just like the cherry on top. To me, the real satisfying thing was, as an artist, you start with a blank piece of paper and you end up with this, and it's never not satisfying.
So it's more about the creation itself.
Yeah.
I remember seeing Sting accept an award at probably the Grammys, and he just got up and he said, music is its own reward.
Yeah,
That it's nice
absolutely.
to have the recognition, but the music itself is why we're here. So that EP gets released in 1995, then re-released by RCA in 96, then released by BMG in 1997. So for our listeners that don't know kind of the what happens in the entertainment industry behind the scenes, the business side of it, why does an album get released multiple times?
Well, we were on Sonic Onion, and so they put it out, and then you know, we we figured, we should make the leap and go to a major label. And there was a kind of a mantra in the Canadian music business then, that you don't want to sign with the Canadian label, because otherwise you're never going to make it in America, because you don't have anyone in the American office who's your champion. So we were in a situation where the president of BMG in Canada just became the president of RCA in New York, Bob Jameson, and he brought the David Bendeth, the infamous A&R man, with him, and so he was our A&R guy, and I don't know if that was the best choice in retrospect. David Bendeth,
He's a producer as well, isn't he, David
yeah,
Bendeth?
not
Yeah.
for no reason that his nickname is Band Death.
Oh, that's not a good nickname.
He was a interesting guy. He was very acerbic. He was not the nicest guy. He was a little diabolical. But I remember,
He sounds perfect for the music
yeah,
industry.
yeah, exactly. But I remember Bob Jameson, like when we met, and I was talking to Bob Dylan about him, and none of the other label presidents, to me, it sounded like they were big music fans or anything. So yeah, we signed with RCA, and then they decided, oh, we should, because that was in the craze, the indie craze, where every major label wanted to buy an indie label so that they could, give their indie acts credibility. So I can't remember the label that came out, but it was an offshoot of RCA. I think it was based in Seattle, and that's what it came out on.
Mm. Is this the REM influence, where REM was huge on campus radio, and then the major labels come and
yeah, exactly.
they're signing all the campus bands?
Yeah, and also the indie backlash of like, oh, you're selling out. So instead of doing that, you soften the blow by saying, oh, well, you're not on Sony, you're on this little cool indie label that Sony bought.
One thing that instantly jumped out at me when I listened to that album is the incredible harmonies. Do harmonies, have they always come easy to you? You can hear harmonies, you can sing harmonies when someone else is singing lead. Is that just always been the way?
It's always been my thing. Again, when we were teenagers, we had this gig in a gravel pit. I decided we were going to do Crosby, Stills, Nash, Sweet Judy, Blue Eyes. So I spent hours like teasing out the harmonies, and then saying, okay, you sing this, I sing this. And from the earliest, the Beatles had great harmonies. I was a big fan of this band called the Lettermen in the 60s. I remember I didn't get exposed to a lot of Beach Boys, but I remember Good Vibrations for me was one of those songs that was just the holy grail of awesomeness. And I always loved the sound of voices together, and I could always figure out what was going on and how this was working.
Yeah, to me, when I see a band live, if there's just the one singer and no other member is singing any harmonies, like that's what differentiates bands for me. If there's harmony, if there's 3-part harmonies, it's like, okay, there's levels to this game.
And I used to love guys who, like Elvis Costello and Bruce Springsteen, that would harmonize with themselves so well, even though they had really distinctive voices and they weren't, didn't sound like the kind of guys that might be like harmony singers. And you know, that was the thing about having a band with two singers. When you have a band with one singer and the other guy says, I can do backups, well, maybe you can, but maybe it doesn't sound that good.
What would you say are the pros and cons of being in a band with two singers? I mean, I guess some of the pros I would think is like if maybe one of you guys is starting to feel a little sick, you don't have to cancel shows, maybe shift the songs a bit so it's
Yeah.
more the other one singing. That's a pro. What else jumps out? Pros and cons.
Well, the cons jump out because that we kind of because record companies hate bands with two singers. They hate it. It makes their brains go explode because they're all about marketing. Like, we need one face. We need one. Give us the one face. So I would say a lot of the reason that Treble Charger stopped was because RCA was basically playing politics against us. There was literally a split into factions of RCA. Some people thought Greg should be the guy, and some people thought I should be the guy. But everyone was in the agreement that there had to be one guy. So there's definitely, you know, we kept saying, what about the Beatles?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's some great examples where it does work, but there's still tension. You know, someone like Blue Rodeo, you know, the way they do it, I had their drummer Glenn for a 2-hour interview, and what you can see with them is everything's divided across 50-50. Like if they have the new album has 10 songs, there's 5 songs from Greg Keeler and there's 5 songs, you know, and when they play live, it's like one person sings, then the next person sings. And the singles, it's like single 1 is, you know, one guy, single 2 is the other guy. Like it's there's like a science to it for them. And that works. But you know, it seemed like with Treble Charger, the newer stuff, it seemed like the singles were mostly Greg, and that's got to have some tension there, you know.
Yeah, well, that's where we you know, got into the pop punk thing, which I wasn't completely behind. But you know, that's the way it goes. I mean, at the same time, you know, I couldn't be more proud of songs like American Psycho and Brand New Low that I, you know, it was, those songs were really a collaborative effort between Greg and me and Matt Hyde, our producer. So it was, you know, some of the most satisfying work I've done.
So that album, so still self-titled in 1995. So that gets the band its first Juno nomination for Best Alternative Album. This is in 1997. That's the first of 5 nominations. Does that one specifically have a special place in your heart for it being the first and having your country acknowledge your talent and your hard work?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Was that our first one? I thought for which album?
The self-title was the first one, I believe.
Yeah, because I think I remember the Junos are always fun. And don't get me wrong, we're bitter about the fact that we went 0 for 5. I'd love to have that freaking statuette, but I remember we were at that Junos, and it was the night before where they had the more special, you know, those kind of categories. And Denny Doherty from Mamas and the Papas was being inducted into the Hall of Fame, and Michelle Phillips was there, and I think she gave a speech, and they played California Dreamin' on the PA, and I was with my manager in one of the back hallways of the venue, and Michelle Phillips came along, and I said, hey, you know, I'm a big fan. I want you to know, like, you know, when they played, because I knew that she'd co-written California Dreamin', and I said, you know, I want you to know that when they played that on the PA, the whole venue went, because that's such a great song. And she said, aren't you sweet, and kissed me on the cheek. And that's one of my favorite Juno memories.
That might be one of the highlights of your life. Yeah, it's crazy. So starting with this album, every album you guys released was nominated for best either rock album or best alternative album at the Junos. Like you guys went 4 for 4 for the
Yeah,
nomination,
yeah,
which is pretty sweet. It makes me think I've interviewed two of the Finger 11 members, and it was on their 7th nomination that they finally won. So they went 0-6, 0-6, and then finally at the end. So those Junos, man, they'll get you. But you know,
yeah,
it's hard enough just to get nominated.
yeah.
So after that, 97, you release Maybe It's Me. This is the big breakout album. 4 singles: Friend of Mine, How She Died, Red, the re-recorded version, and Ever She Flows. So Friend of Mine, you know, at this point, 97, how old am I? So 85, 95. So I'm 12 years old, and Friend of Mine is like undeniable. It's out there. What was it like to have like an undeniable radio hit? So you had radio play before, but this was like a legit, you know, this is a hit. It's undeniable.
I was again, those things never seem to matter so much to me. I mean, you know, touring got easier. You know, we played to more people, which is always fun. Yeah, it's you know, I don't remember the big shows so much as, you know, a show that stands out for me was the first time we played on a weekend headlining the Rivoli in Toronto, tiny place, and just having the feeling that, wow, this place is packed, which is like literally 88 people, and they're all really, really into it.
There's the back room and the front room, right? At the Rivoli?
Yeah, the little back room there. So I don't, yeah, it was just, you know, it's the air you breathe, so you don't really, yeah, I don't know.
Do you have this? So this album is also your first gold album in Canada. Do you feel the same way with a gold album as you feel with a hit single on the radio? It is what it is.
No, the gold album was definitely nice, and you know, I think maybe that's our best record. That to me, it's the midpoint. It's before we went really pop punk, and I feel like there's just a lot of good songs on that record. And I also feel like I remember having a rough mix or an unmastered mix and playing it for Brendan McGuire, who was a sound guy for Sloan at the time. He recorded the Sloan Between the Bridges album, and I was playing him a song, and he said, finally a producer that knows how to make Greg's voice sound good, because he songs like Friend of Mine and was it Shorefire, maybe? I can't remember now, but it's, you know, everyone sounded good on that, and that was our first time working with a big producer, Lou Giordano. We spent 3 months in Boston, and it was a great time. It was this really cool studio called Fort Apache, and you know, first time like having just, you know, amazing gear. Like, oh, here's a 12 string. Oh, here's a Vox AC30. Wow, though, that sounds really good together.
Yeah, one thing that stands out with that album is there is a more polished, more commercial sound. That has to do with a bigger budget from a major label, that you're in a better studio, better engineers, producers, mixers, better equipment. Is that, I guess that's the reason behind it.
And also, you know, I think that album and the subsequent 2 albums with Matt Hyde, you know, taught Greg and I both how to be a producer. So, you know, having an outside ear is so important. It's funny because I have the same thing with bands now. There was one of the songs, I can't remember, but one of the mid-tempo songs of mine on Maybe It's Me, I Don't Know, it's called. And we played it for Lou, and Lou said, this thing you're calling the chorus, that's not the chorus, that's the bridge. This thing that you think is the pre-chorus, that's the chorus. And I went, no, you're crazy. And I went, oh yeah, you're totally right. This is better. That bridge should only, what we're calling the chorus should only happen once. And I've done the identical thing with bands today, because because when you're a young band, you may know how to write melodies, you may know how to write a whole song, but you don't have that depth of knowledge about how songs work and how to make them better. And Lou was great at that. He was like, that's what I do today as a producer. Like I tell people, I just take the parts that are good and I want more of that, and take the parts that are bad. I want less of that.
You're like carving a sculpture and
Yeah.
taking the best stuff that's in there. So the song Red was re-recorded for this album, released as a single, becomes a top 20 single. It's one of Treble Charger's signature songs. It's my favorite Treble Charger song. And I have two things I got to share, and you've probably already heard this, but Red placed at number 8 on the greatest Canadian songs of all time in 1996 by the music magazine Chart. And then the CBC had it on their list of the 50 best Canadian songs of the 90s. So some pretty big accolades. What was the decision to re-record and re-release that one song as a single? Out of all the other songs that had come before it, that's the one that was chosen.
Well, I think, the song's a bit of an albatross for me because it's literally one of the first songs I've written. Like after the bad album that we ditched that I mentioned, I Red must have been one of the 3 next songs that I wrote. And we love that early version. It has a very bad sounding a Big Muff solo on it that I wasn't so crazy about, but it had a certain thing to it. I feel like the vocal might be a little stronger than the re-release, but it kind of worked out poorly for us having it, because it was, people in Toronto heard it all the time, and Toronto rules the music industry. So when we re-recorded it and re-released it, the city of Toronto was like, well, we've heard this before, we're not going to play. So, and Toronto radio country, so because they were a little less than enthusiastic, I feel like it could have been a bigger single than it was. But when the indie version was never heard in the other parts of the country, and then that version was mostly heard in the other parts of the country. But what are you going to do? I think everyone at RCA, they're like, there's no way you're not putting this on. Like, and we're like, okay, cool.
Yeah, it's such an undeniable song. Do you as a guitarist, do you have like an app on your phone or a hard drive on your computer that just has all these guitar riffs and guitar ideas that you can go to and pluck from? Or are you like some of my other guests where it's all up in here?
Yeah, not then. I don't think I did. I do that a lot now. But yeah, I don't think I did that at all then. I think I just...
Well, it hasn't been that long that we've had, phones that have apps capable of that, and even computers, Pro Tools and all that. Before, if you wanted to record anything, you had to get to a studio and pay big bucks.
Well, I always had 4 tracks. So I would probably, starting with Maybe It's Me, I would do 4-track demos.
So for our listeners that like the equipment side of music, are you able to share the guitars that you use, the pedals you use, the amps you use to get kind of your signature sound?
Yeah, well, my sound for the first 2 Treble Charger records was I have a Fender Stratocaster that I bought in 1989, which is my kind of my main guitar. I also had a Charvel Surfcaster around that time. I used that a lot. But I used a Boss pedal called the Metal Zone.
Good name.
It's a lot of people think it's the greatest pedal ever, and a lot of people think it's one of the worst sounding pedals ever. And I remember when Matt Hyde, our producer, when he said, wow, you use the Metal Zone in the way you're not supposed to use it, because you're supposed to do metal with it. And it had this very extensive EQ section where you could you could dial out that mid range to get that horrible scooped metal sound. But I was just trying to get a Neil Young Crazy Horse sound, so I reefed that mid range, and that's the distorted sound in Red and in everything. So just either the Charvel or the Strat into a Fender amp with the metal zone, and maybe like a Boss Super Overdrive in front of it that would make the metal zone sound a little less processy. The last time I picked up a metal zone, I was like, oh yeah, this is great. I'm like, wow, that is awful. It had this kind of lack of bottom end. But somehow I made it work.
If the video game Guitar Hero came around and asked for just one treble charger song that you could submit so people could get their plastic guitars and play along, which treble charger song do you submit? Red's got some cool parts and some cool riffs. What do you think you submit?
I would say maybe American Psycho, because it has that
catchy riff. Yeah.
That catchy riff, yeah, with the Electric Mistress flanger. And
that's a good choice. In 2000, you guys released Wide Awake Bored. This has 3 singles. We've been talking about American Psycho, Brand New Low, and Business. So this is now your first platinum album, top 10, another Juno nomination. This gets 2 Juno nominations, because not just album, but also single for American Psycho. Is it fair to say that American Psycho was the band's biggest hit period of your career? And why do you think people, if so, why do you think people just love that song so much?
Yeah, I would say that's our biggest hit. I just think it like I say, Greg and Matt Hyde and I, we worked long and hard. I think one of the reasons that album turned out so well is because we did a lot of pre-production. We were also, RCA was this was our second album, and the first album had not been successful in America, so it was very put up or shut up, and they put us through the ringer. They wouldn't even commit to making the whole album. They made us do it in 2 halves, so which was really expensive because you had to do a drum setup twice, and it was frighteningly expensive. I think that record, I think it cost 500,000 American dollars to make. We went to Sound City in LA, which was amazing. We had Joe Barresi, who was like the super uber producer. He was just there as drum tech. He was just tuning the drums and helping set up the drums. We had Rami from the Wallflowers playing keyboards. It was just a great time. We were living in corporate apartments in LA, coming to the studio every day and making music. And it was just so, yeah. And I'm very, like I said, I'm very proud of, I wrote a lot of the lyrics to American Psycho that I thought were, I was very, very happy with. And that riff, actually, I give our David Bendith, our A&R guy, a lot of credit. He's the one, but we recorded a completely different arrangement, and it was actually completely done, and we edited it to put that guitar riff at the top of the song. It was just going to start with that. In retrospect, was like, wow, it's a terrible beginning. But he could see that, and he said, "No, you need to do this." And we're like, "You're crazy." And then we somehow made that edit, and it sounds great.
Is Sound City in LA, is that the studio that Dave Grohl made the movie Sound City?
Yeah.
And it's like Rage Against the Machine recorded their debut there. And
so many great.
Fleetwood Mac, I think.
Fleetwood Mac.
Tom Petty. Yeah, it's I
remember
one of the best studios.
The giant live room, and there's a grand piano, and someone said, yeah, only Tom Petty uses that. That's
fair enough.
I think maybe for the album Cheap Trick, Heaven Tonight was recorded there. And it was not very glamorous. It looked its age. It was very rough looking, and it was a lot of fun hanging out there.
The success of the band allowed you guys to tour around the world. Were there any favorite places that you like to visit when you went on tour?
Well, around there was not around the world. We were just in North America. Halifax has always been one of my favorite places to play. The people there love music so much. In the 90s, I was in this magic indie bubble. I never heard any Salt and Pepper or like I can't hum a Sublime song. All I listened to was Sonic Youth and Pavement and Guided by Voices and Stereolab. And I remember one particular tour. Every time we'd show up for sound check and it would be Offspring, Keep Them Separated. And it'd be like, oh, if I hear that song one more time, I'm going to kill myself. And I remember arriving at the venue in Halifax and Stereolab was playing. And I just went, oh,
My people.
yeah. And, with the music you hear before you go on makes such a big difference. It could just make you have a great show. And the Halifax audiences were always great. I always loved playing Portland and Seattle. New York was always amazing. We played 2 or 3 times at this little room called the Mercury Lounge with amazing sound system, amazing sounding stage. Yeah,
Those are the ones that stand out.
one of the gigs that stands out for me is because we opened for the Foo Fighters on a big US tour on their second album, and we were playing LA, and I had round glasses like this, different ones. They were even more kind of dorky architect glasses at the time, and we were first on the bill, so we were about to go on. I was setting up, and someone in the crowd was heckling me, and I still marvel back, thinking like it didn't faze me one bit. We'd been on the road forever, and I just kind of looked at this guy like, oh yeah, MF, like who's on the stage right now, huh?
You were battle tested at that point.
I was bad. So instead of like going, oh no, I was just like, it empowered me to be. I had like a fun, angry show that night.
You channeled that energy. Was it just a Foo Fighters fan that didn't care about who the opener
I don't know.
was?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, it was that tour was Foo Fighters and Talk Show. I don't know if you remember Talk Show. That was the Stone Temple Pilots offshoot when Scott Weiland was in rehab, and they hooked up with their high school buddy that played in a cover band. So he was the singer, and that tour, we didn't hang out with the Foo Fighters much because it was mostly like really old, big 4,000 seat theaters in the US. And they were always set up on one side of the Foo Fighters dressing room would be on one side of the venue, and our dressing room and Talk Show would be on the other side. And those guys were just sweethearts, the DeLeo brothers and Eric, the drummer. They just like, I think like Dean DeLeo went to Guitar Center in LA to buy a pedal for Greg. So I think a pedal broke down. He's like, oh, I got you this Boss distortion. And
it's nice to hear those stories of the good guys in the industry.
Yeah. They were just a joy to be with.
We have a fan question. This is from Amanda Luciano. She asks, what is your craziest or most memorable fan interaction? It could be sweet, funny, or crazy.
Fan interaction.
Nobody threw their underwear or anything?
I don't think so. I don't know. I was not much of a fan interaction guy. So my story is kind of lame, just being at some weird gig in Toronto outside somewhere, like where there wasn't really a backstage area, and this woman came up to me with her daughters and said, I know you're the one that doesn't really like to talk to fans, but could you sign this for me? And I was like, yeah, sure, no problem.
It's very considerate.
Yeah. So I was that guy. I kind of hid from the fans.
Would you say you're an introvert, or that's not what it is?
Yeah, I would say I'm an introvert. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Do your songs usually come together in a specific order when you're writing? So, for example, some people just write a ton of lyrics and eventually put it to music. Some guitarists are always writing music and then they put a melody to it and then eventually fit words within that melody. Or do your songs just, some of them start with guitar, some with lyrics, some with vocals?
Yeah, I think it's very varied with me. Some songs, Red, I remember Red very vividly because I had a black, it was by these kind of black notebooks, and I would just write things that hopefully I would come up with a turn of phrase and I would write it down. I remember at the bottom of the page on the left, I had written, "Saw you looking for a light, face painted cigarette white." And I wrote that down. I closed the book, and then however many days later, I looked at that and was like, "Oh, that's pretty good." And then I think the rest came pretty fast. The first song on Priddle Concern, Union of Concerned Scientists, I was watching the CBC, and there was an interview with the president of the Union of Concerned Scientists, and his name was Dr. Robert Pollard. And Robert Pollard is the singer from Guided by Voices, one of my favorite bands. So I was like, oh yeah, Union of Concerned Scientists. That's good. I wrote the entire lyrics in about 3 minutes, and I looked at it and I thought, wow, that's really good, but I do not know how to put this to music. And then months later, I was like, oh, I could do this. Other times I do other times I do the complete opposite approach. Sometimes I will write an entire song with no lyrics and no melody, and I'll wait for like, okay, I'll come up with that later. I've done that on 2 or 3 of these pointless songs. It was like, okay, I'll just I've got something good here. It'll come to me.
Do you still have some of those that you're still waiting where
Yep.
the music's done and you're just waiting?
Yep, there's 2 or 3 pointless songs that I'm like, this is a good backing track.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you ever had songs come to you so easily that you just felt like the conduit, you just felt like the medium
Absolutely.
that it was passing through? So
Absolutely.
you might call it, I don't know, God gives you a song, or the infinite
Yep.
intelligence or source, or however you want to say it.
Yeah, I think any songwriter that has that happen to them, they're always going to be describe themselves as an agnostic and not an atheist, because it's something Christ is on the lawn from Maybe It's Me. I remember 3 a.m. I woke up my ex-wife like, you have to hear this right now, because it just boom, it came to me, and I think I wrote the whole song in 20 minutes or something.
Those are, when, like you mentioned, you went a few years with some writer's block. So when you get those gifts, you must really appreciate them.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
Well, like I say, there hasn't been those kind of songs since those days. Now I toil and sweat, but
So we're all the way to the final Trouble Charger album. So this is Detox in 2002, and then we'll move into everything else: Broken Social Scene, Don Vale, all that stuff. So Detox, 3 singles, 100 Million, Don't Believe It All, Ideal Waste of Time. This is your second gold album, another top 10 album, another Juno nomination. Did you feel massive pressure after the success of the previous album that went platinum and had such a big hit with American Psycho?
well, I didn't really want to make this record. Things were, like I said, Greg and I have known each other since we were infants, so we weren't really seeing eye to eye all that much, and this coincides with Broken Social Scene, because before that, I'm going to say probably the downtime after Wide Awake Bored, my ex-wife was in the publishing business, and she worked for Kevin Drew's dad, David Drew, and she was talking to Kevin one day, and Kevin's a big indie rock guy, and he said, your boyfriend's an NC-17? He was always like, I don't recognize Treble Charger, NC-17. And so the album before the first Broken Social Scene record, KC Accidental, which was him and Charles Spearin from Broken Social Scene, they were making a record in the basement of CIUT in Toronto, and Kevin said, come and play on it. I remember distinctly, Charles is one of the nicest guys ever, but he was a indie rock guy, and when I got there, I could tell from his look, like, this was not my idea. This some like major label sellout rock guy playing on our record. This isn't that. But I did a pass on this 18-minute song, and Kevy said, yeah, no, let's do one more, less distorted guitar. And I'm like, well, I thought there were good bits. Do you want to play it back? He said, Bill, the song's 17 minutes long. There's no playbacks, which I thought was a great. So then we started getting together in Kevin's basement in Parkdale. Kevin, Justin Peroff, the drummer, Brendan Canning, and Charles and me, and it was just improv jamming. And one of the first, I don't know, like well before it was Broken Social Scene, we did this gig at Ted's Wrecking Yard, and it was just, I remember the set list. One of the songs was just D. It's in D. And I was trying, and Charlie and I had a really great kind of indie Allman Brothers rapport going, and it was just good fun. And then I played a little on the first Broken Social Scene record.
Feel Good Lost.
Yeah. I remember years later, I think I'd had some drinks and I was listening to a song and I was like, wait a second, someone's ripping off my thing here. What the? Oh, right, it's me. So when we made Detox, we were Rob Sanzo that recorded the first two albums we did. It was a place on Dundas, and he'd now had this much nicer studio in the Darling building in the Fashion District. So on Spadina, just south of Queen. And we were using Matt again, and he came here. So we didn't have so much awesome gear, but Matt brought a little bit of gear, and we didn't have the budget. We didn't have the big major label budget for pre-production, so we didn't get a chance to, like, as Matt said, we didn't get the chance to treble chargerize Greg's songs. They were kind of like, this is what they are, and we're going to go with that. And it was kind of stressful, and it was very much kind of like, for the first time you thought, like, oh, we have to sound like this. And I would finish, and then I would go around the corner to this little studio at just around the corner from the Cameron House, and Broken Social Scene were recording You Forgot It and People. And I remember one night they were recording the Brendan song with the hand clapping. I can't remember what it's called. And it was just like feedback. It was just woo! And I was like, wow, you guys are so lucky. You get to do whatever you want. And I pretty much, my wife and I had a baby, and I was pretty much doing this album for the money. We got new management. We had this big Uber manager, and I thought, okay, all I want to do is do one headlining hockey rink tour like the Bare Naked Ladies, and then you go out for 3 weeks and you come home with $400,000 each, and then I'm going to buy a house in Toronto. We never quite got there because it coincided with the end of music. The albums were no longer selling. It was the beginning of
Napster and all that.
Napster and all that.
iTunes.
2002, 2003. And so I remember, listening to Broken Social Scene, thinking like, yeah, you get to do whatever you want, but you you guys are going to sell 5,000 copies in Canada, and we're going to sell. I mean, our last album we sold 100,000. We're going to sell 200,000 this time. Well, in the end, I have a very beautiful Broken Social Scene gold record on my wall.
Both of your albums went gold, but in very different ways.
So that taught me a valuable lesson. Never make musical decisions about money ever again. Again, possibly to my detriment, but
yeah, I hear you. We have a fan question here. This is to do with so after you left the band in 2003, the band itself disbanded in 2006, and then you guys reunited in 2012 for a few shows. So we have a question from Mike Lamond. What brought the band back together in 2012, and was there an adjustment period in playing together again, or was it like a bike you just hop back on?
I think, like I said, my relationship with Greg was pretty fractured, and I remember, being in a. Everyone talks about it now. No one talked about it then. Being in a band on the road is really bad for your mental health, and everyone struggles and everyone deals with it in their own way. And it got to the point where Greg and I were not communicating much, and we didn't really want to be around each other. We were probably both resentful of each other for whatever reason. Like I said, RCA had played us off against each other, to the point where, like, the RCA guy that wanted me to be the guy, Greg hated him, and the guy that wanted Greg to be the guy, I didn't like him, and I said, okay, I don't want to do this anymore. And I thought at the time, like, I could probably hang out with Rosie again, but I don't want to see Greg for years. And it turned out to be completely false, because we're basically family. So it's kind of, we both kind of came to the realization, like, when you're visiting home and you go to visit the other guy's parents because you want to say hi, it's pretty much, maybe this is a relationship that should be repaired. And I'd kind of hit the wall in my so-called cooking career, and I was like, I'm done with this. And like, so I called up Greg, and we had kind of a tearful reunion, and we said, let's do this again. And we decided to do it just the two of us, and get hired guys just to because we didn't want to go back to that dysfunction of the four people and everyone's competing agendas, and then it just became, we kind of said, like, this is going to be fun. We're going to make some money, and we're going to have fun, and it's going to be easy. It's like, this decision making is going to be easy. If we both agree that we want to do something, we'll do it, and otherwise we won't do it. So we haven't done a show for a little while, but I'm not calling the band dead. We've been both kind of busy doing our own thing. We're both back in Sault Ste. Marie now, but
so you're saying there's a chance?
There's a chance. We're very, very, very slowly working on new music. Been sitting on a couple things. It's, again, when you've been through the ringer like we have, and had so many people say, oh, this is it, this is the one, and it never really happens, and you get a little gun shy. So we're trying to create a stress-free thing for us to put out new music, and I hope it'll happen, but certainly we will play gigs together again. I think we have a show that we booked that got canceled by the pandemic that I think we're going to do next summer.
Amazing. So final treble charger question. If in the future, I'm talking like 200, 400, 500 years from now, if most of today's music has faded from public consciousness, but you're able to have just one treble charger song still be available, still be around, that people are playing, what song do you choose to best represent the band? So it doesn't have to be a single, it doesn't have to be the most popular songs, but you yourself, if you could put the band's music in a time capsule and it's still around, what song do you choose to best represent the band?
Well, that's a tough one. I don't know if I could narrow it down to one. I mean, Red would be a good example. Ever She Flows might not be bad, or I might even go with.
We'll give you an EP then. You can have a 3-song, 5-song EP that's still being played in 500 years.
Okay, my EP would be Red, Ever She Flows, and Trinity Bellwoods from NC-17, just because that was a very collaborative effort. Greg's song, but I wrote most of the lyrics, and also that song was possibly the most fun I've ever had in the studio.
That's a good 3-song EP, and they'll be able to listen to it. Just it can just come to them because that's where we're at with technology.
Exactly. Yeah.
They probably have a chip or something.
A chip. Yeah, exactly. Perfect sound.
Yeah, so let's move into Broken Social Scene. You've already mentioned how that came to be, that they were around the corner and there was a connection. So the first 2 albums that you contributed to, the second one that went gold, that won a Juno Award. Yeah, so it won for Alternative Album of the Year.
Yep.
As someone that contributed but isn't officially a member of the band, is that considered winning a Juno? How does that work?
Well, I
would tell people that I've won a Juno. I'm just saying.
I was at the Junos, and I did go on stage to accept it with them, but I don't have a statuette, so I'm somewhere in the middle. I always refer to myself as a founding non-member of Broken Social Scene. One of my biggest regrets, I think if I'd learned saxophone or trumpet in high school, I would be in Broken Social Scene, no question, because they always want guys that can multitask, and they always want guys that can become the horn section, like Charlie.
They've got enough guitarists, I suppose.
Yeah, they've got enough guitarists.
Yeah,
but yeah, it's been a great. Kevin's an awesome guy, and I knew Brendan Canning. He's, I would say, the first champions of NC-17 in Toronto were Brendan Canning and Dave Bookman. So, I've known Canning forever. We did one of our first cross Canada tours with Head in the summer of '95, and they're all great people. And I was lucky enough to go on when Kevin did a solo album called Spirit If. I did a European tour with him, which was just amazing fun. And it was, again, it spoke to the, Treble Charger, we're all mostly Sault Ste. Marie guys. We grew up in, a very toxic masculinity time. So I just remember being on the tour bus, and every day everyone hugged each other good morning, and I thought, wow, this is amazing. In Treble Charger there was no touching.
Yeah, there was a no touching rule.
Yeah.
So I have some kind words here from Brendan Canning of Broken Social Scene. So he I don't know him that well, but he clearly has a sense of humor. So he says, Bill knows that I think he's a legend. Ask him if he has reasonable accommodations if I come to Sault Ste. Marie with my girlfriend and Chihuahua.
Geez, I wish I could. I could come in the summer. I think I can get you put up at my brother's cottage. I myself don't have much reasonable accommodation, but I could probably make it work. I never really liked your Chihuahua. Sorry.
No pets allowed. That's too funny. That's too funny. So I have a little blurb here written about Broken Social Scene that I think you'll appreciate. So it says the collective and the respective projects have had a broad influence on the alternative music and indie rock scene during the early 21st century. In 2021, Pitchfork listed the band among the most important artists of the last 25 years. So my question is, how amazing is it to not only be a part of that, but be there basically at the inception of it?
It was so. I remember when because we did Detox, when we finished Detox and they finished You Forgot It in People, then I was touring Detox and essentially like lost my place in the Broken Social Scene band, and Andrew Whiteman came in, and but it was I had a copy of the I had like 5 CDs of the record when I went out on tour, and so like the coolest promoters and music people that I found was like, okay, this one's for you. And I remember thinking, like, I would say to people, this is going to be the next big thing in Canadian indie rock. Trust me, I will stake my reputation on this. Well, I was almost right. I just wasn't right about the Canadian part, because they became a indie rock phenomenon everywhere, you know, not just Canada. So I wasn't thinking big enough, but it was, I'm really proud of my small, I do the Pacific theme arpeggio thing, and so whenever I get a chance to play with them, I usually jump up for that song. And yeah, they're just great people to work with, and yeah, it's just I'm very, very proud of my association.
So moving on through the discography, man, there's so much. You've had such a lengthy career with so much stuff going on. So we're moving on to Don Vale. So this is after a move to Dunnville, Ontario. So this is around 2003. Can you share the story of how you come to be a part of that project?
Yeah, I moved to Dunnville. So I left Treble Charger, and my ex-wife and I had a baby, and we thought, like, let's move out of Toronto. And back then, if you draw a circle an hour and a half away from Toronto and you look at all the places, the cheapest real estate is Dunnville. And her parents were living very close by on Lake Erie. As we moved into this beautiful 60-year-old cedar house on a double lot in this sleepy town. And as I started to meet people there, everyone said, "Oh, you got to meet this guy, Mitch. Oh, you got to meet Mitch. Oh, you got to meet Mitch." And he was working at this golf club, and I don't play golf much anymore, but I actually became a member of, I got to play golf like once or twice a week, which was awesome. And I met Mitch, and I don't know how it happened, but immediately it was like, okay, yeah, I'm going to play in your band. And we had this, we both miss it, because it's where I wrote almost all of Priddle Concern. They had a rehearsal room in a barn about 20 minutes out of town. And so it was a barn that they built a room inside with just plywood walls and cheap plywood floors. And like, it was just a ugly room with like Pixies posters on the wall. And it was just like a songwriting machine, because you were so isolated. We were probably 300 meters from the farmhouse, and you'd go out for a smoke, and there'd be fireflies and deer going by. And it was, you know, you went out there and there was just this ugly room. So all you could do was make music. And so we both wrote a lot of songs there, and we used to rehearse that. We had no bass player, just the drummer, Dave Dunham, and Mitch Bowden and myself every Monday. And those are some of the most fun rehearsals I've ever had. And that the whole project for me was just, every gig was fun. Mitch is just an incredibly talented guy, an amazing singer, amazing songwriter. His growth over these 3 albums has just been amazing. Their last album is a masterpiece. And this first one, and we got to go, we worked with Jordan Zadarozny. He mixed it, and we did some of the recording there. And I hadn't seen Jordan since they opened a show for us in like Alabama, I think. And so we had a great time reuniting, and Jordan's a great guy. We share a lot of the same musical taste. We're both obsessed with ZZ Top and a lot of 70s stuff. And yeah, Mitch was just, you know, this was like, I call it melodic math rock. It's kind of evolved into more of a like indie pop thing now, but the first album was all about drop D, lots of distortion, and the shows for me were just couldn't have been more fun. Every show was just like, this is so great.
The notes that I took down while listening to the first album, I put cool guitar work, great harmonies and melodies, some different time signatures, unique production. Really enjoyed it. It sounds like a band having fun with no musical restrictions. Is that an accurate description? That's kind of what
Yeah,
you said about it was just so much fun.
yeah. It's all Mitch. I mean, I play on a little bit of stuff, just like, oh, maybe, since you, because they pretty much had all of it recorded before I joined. And then I was like, oh, I've added this part. Maybe I could do that in the studio. So we went, like I said, for a weekend in outside Ottawa to Jordan's studio. And also the drummer, Dave Dunham. He's I think what he does mostly now is video editing, but I feel like he's one of the best drummers in Canada. He's so incredibly solid. So I played in their band, and they became the Priddle Concern band, and both the three of us, and like always in search of a bass player. We have cycled through bass players, but yeah, Dave Dunham, like, the Justin Peroff played the drums on the Priddle Concern, and some of it's pretty complicated. And Dave would just be like, "Oh yeah, boom, boom, boom," like no problem. Just the most solid drummer. Yeah, great guys.
My three favorite songs from that first album: Black Book Page, I Knew This Would Happen, and Hobson Unite. And I have a quote here from one of my all-time favorite bands. So right above me here is Winter Sleep. That's one of their albums from the East Coast. You mentioned the good music scene in the East Coast. So I got a quote from their guitarist, Tim Dion, and something that ties everyone together is their current bass player is Chris Bell, who played on the album. So this is what Tim Dion says. He says, Bill is a fantastic musician and someone I admire as a musician and as a person. The Don Vale record he made with Chris Bell is really rad. I'm sure if I asked Chris, he'd have some good stories to share that include Bill. So he said I asked the wrong Winter Sleep member, that Chris is the one that would have all the amazing stories to share.
Well, no, it's funny because at some point, 2004, 2005, Don Vale, we drove out to Halifax to play the Halifax Pop Explosion, and Winter Sleep were there. And Tim and I spent a really awesome afternoon just wandering around and having coffee and just having a great time. And I always cherish that. So that's great that he said that. And Winter Sleep, yeah, great band. Obviously, Joel, one of the best drummers in Canada.
He's playing with Billy Talent right now, which is crazy.
Of course, that makes sense.
Yeah, they needed a drummer because it's the same drummer for Billy Talent and Alexis on Fire. And Alexis on Fire they're both on tour right now. Yeah. So there's the conflict. So slips Lowell Campbell from Winter Sleep. So
yeah. Oh, and that's the same, the Alexis on Fire guys, they're buddies with Don Vale because it's the same kind of area, because Don Vale's about halfway between St. Catharines and Hamilton.
So now we're talking the Priddle Concern. So this is starting after Treble Charger. You start writing this stuff, and it takes a few years to come out. So you start writing in 2004, and it isn't until 2007 that it comes out. Did it just take that long to write the music, or was there industry-related delays? Or
no, I took too long. Some of the songs, the song I Like to Smoke, I wrote that again in a very short time because we were on tour. We were in Edmonton, and our tour manager was from Edmonton, and we were on our way to the airport, and we stopped at his apartment, and we were waiting in the van for him, and then he was taking forever, and we were like, he's having sex with his girlfriend right now, isn't he? And so I went out for a smoke, and I like to smoke before the airport run, and almost the whole song came to me, and so there was a lot. There was a song. One of the songs was going to be on Detox, but Matt said, you know what, this is too out there given the kind of band you've become. It's too many weird chords. It's not going to fit. I was like, okay, fine. And so this was kind of, you know, I didn't have so many songs on Detox. So it was sort of my George Harrison, All Things Must Pass. I've got all these songs that left over that didn't have a place. We actually recorded Union of Concerned Scientists for a record, and it didn't come. Matt wanted to do just a solo acoustic, and it didn't come out that great. So, and then I moved to Dunnville and started writing again, you know, like I said, in this great barn. And then I just sort of did it like my wife was working. So I was at home with our baby. And I would just go on like weekends I just, for some reason, decided to do it with 4 different producers. So I did 5 or 6 songs with Howie Beck, 2 songs with John Critchley from 13 Engines, 4 songs, I think, with that 2 Minute Miracles guy in London. God, I'm blanking on his name. Should have gone through this in my head before.
That's all.
And one with Dave Neufeld, who produced the Broken Social Scene records. And that was one too many. Kevin Drew put it well. He said, "Priddle, you're going to hate working with Neufeld, but you're going to love the way it sounds."
And that was accurate.
Yeah.
I had a mentor in the business world once where, you know, he would basically say, like, you can hate me now, but you'll love me when you're successful. And it's basically that with the music.
Yeah.
Yeah. So was there a sense of freedom writing for the Priddle concern? I'm sure you had you've mentioned a little bit, but you had all this music that just doesn't fit. Treble Charger is now something very specific. So was there a freedom to not have to fit everything in that box?
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted it to be like a Neil Young album. That's why it's kind of like there's lots of acoustic guitar, but there's lots of rock songs. I want to be, what would Neil Young do? Well, he would just throw everything into a pot, and so it was very satisfying and geez, what's his name? Is it Andy?
You'll wake up in the middle of the night.
Yeah, exactly. But we were talking one day, and I said, you know, one of my regrets is that, you know, he was engineering, that I didn't learn. You know, I squandered all my time in Treble Charger. I didn't learn how to be an engineer and a producer. And he said, "What, you're not a producer?" He said, "What do you think you're doing right now?" And I was like, "Oh." And that was kind of always the first two albums I kind of produced. It was me that said, okay, now we need this part. Now we need this part. And then, like I say, I think, you know, I've come to producing very late in the game, but I don't know if I could have done it even 10 years ago. It just seems like I have so much accumulated being obsessed with music that now it's very fulfilling to me producing, because sometimes it feels like I'm in understanding the matrix. When I look at a song and I understand what it should be, and you know, like when Neo sees everything in the code and it all comes together for him. You listen to music for so long, and then you realize, oh, this is what makes a good song, and this is what makes a bad song, and these are the rules that you have to follow for this and for this and for this.
What would you say are the roles of a producer for our listeners that don't know the production side of music?
Well, like I said before, some people might write great lyrics and they might write great melodies, but when they put the song together, it needs some work. It's like I said, like, you know, what you think is the chorus, that's not the chorus, that's the bridge. And just you know, it's being a producer is kind of like being a film director. You have to keep an eye on the big picture and the details at the same time. And for me, that's really satisfying because I'm able to process all that and realize all that, and just make the songs better. Not everyone knows how to make their thing, and an outside ear is always welcome. We were a song on Maybe It's Me. We there was a middle section, and we slaved over how long it should be. So should it be 4 bars? Should it be 8 bars? Should it be 12 bars? Should it be 16 bars? We tried it every way, and we came up with the length we wanted, and we were happy. And then Tom Lord Alge was mixing it, the famous mixer, and he just cut it. And Lou said, "But we spent so much time on that." He said, "I don't freaking care. It sounds better this way." And that's, it's great to have an outside ear that's not in. Sometimes you get so caught up with the process. Oh, we worked hard on this, but if something else is better, an outside ear, they don't know, they don't have that bias of like, we worked so hard, so this has to stay. You have this uncolored ear that you can take things at face value and say, this part is not good. I don't care how long you worked on it.
So I've listened to various artists that you've produced, and the music is great. It's all very different. So is that an important quality to have as a producer, as someone that's able to enjoy and understand the wide spectrum of genres?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm not gonna produce hardcore or
you're not doing the next
metal.
You're not doing the next Slipknot album,
No, or that kind of thing, or like real radio pop. But other than that, a good song is a good song. I mean, I'm a song person. That's my thing. I want to make songs sound good. So the Jackson Reed was really satisfying to me, because it was a terrible demo, but I was like, oh, there's really good things hidden in this bad demo, and that was really satisfying, because I had a whole vision for that. This is what it's going to be like. Jackson sings and plays acoustic guitar, and the drummer plays. I think everything else is me, and I had this guitar is going to do this guitar is going to do that. The Lightmares, that's the only single that's out right now, but that's an amazing record. I mean,
it to me, it sounded like there was multiple choruses, like the payout that's like, oh, here's the chorus, that's the payout I've been waiting for.
Yeah.
I got that multiple times. It feels like there's like several choruses.
Well, I'm a bridge crafter. I love bridges. It was always my job to write bridges. Like I wrote the bridge on American Psycho and Brand New Low. And so I really wanted, and Jamie writes good bridges too. So I was always like, I want to make this bridge like amazing. But I mean, that's a good song off that record, but there are 4 songs on that record that are just amazing. I think there's no bad songs on this record. I mean, I don't know how successful they're going to be in seeing it be successful, but to me, this is a shoe-in for, it should be on the Polaris long list, at least. I think they're just an amazing talent. Jamie's a poet. We had a great time recording that. And yeah, I think it's a band to look out for.
Your current focus outside of producing is on a project called Pointless. So do you consider this a band? Like there's different members, or it's another outlet for your music?
It's a band, but it's kind of my solo outlet. So it's like I said, this kind of solved my writer's block. And the way it happened was the first project that my partner Dustin, so he owns a studio here in downtown Sault Ste. Marie, and he bought this for nothing. And this is I can never remember his name, but the studio architect that designed Revolution, the preeminent Canadian studio architect, he designed this place. So this is essentially an unfinished best studio between Toronto and Vancouver. Like the physical control room, I have no doubt, is the best control room between Vancouver and Toronto. So we have this great space. We need lots of money to finish it, but we're just doing things on like we're running an extension cord from the bathroom, and it's freezing in the winter. But so Dustin is the bass player. And the first project we did was with this pop punk band called A Dire Setback, and they had booked a gig, and the gig was about 3 weeks away. And I messaged this bass player that I knew, and I said, "Hey, do you want to be in my new band?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Does your drummer want to be in my new band?" He said, "Yeah." And I literally like got up off the computer, went over, grabbed my guitar, and started writing songs because I needed songs for this band. And I wrote 4 or 5 songs in the next 3 weeks. I think, yeah, the first 2 I sent you, I wrote those 2, and then subsequently wrote the third one that I think is the best song I've written in a while. The demo I sent you for If It's All the Same, and so again, I'm the closer it gets to being finished, the more gun shy I am. But I think we've decided we're just gonna finish some songs and release them, and not worry about finishing the whole album. Because again, as we've discussed, but no one cares about whole albums now. So
So it's about 10 or 11 songs that you have written anyways?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, you sent me the rough mixes for 3 different songs. So Against the Day, All Right Already, and If It's All the Same. So my notes are great melodies, great bass work. There's like very active bass through the songs, which is very cool. Love the distorted guitar riffs. The songs aren't in a rush. They take their time to build atmosphere, painting a picture, haunting lyrics. And Against the Day was my favorite of the 3.
Nice. Yeah, it was definitely, because I've always been, right from NC-17, I've always been like, don't let the listener get bored. Like this happens, boom, 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 boom. And with this, I wanted to, so much of the stuff I listen to now, like bands like Deer Hunter or Kurt Vile, they're just in no hurry, like you say, which is, I find, is the best way to describe it. It's just like, I've never had that kind of thing in the music I make. I've never been like, let's just like relax and and in a way, this album is kind of like my indie rock grab bag, kind of like the Tom Petty's second last record is called Mojo with the Heartbreakers, and I don't know if you know this album. It's very blues, and it's kind of like every single kind of blues you can imagine. So I'm trying to do the same with indie rock. So the All Right Already is my Stereo Lab homage, just one chord, dun dun for 8 minutes.
Yeah, my impression with those 3 songs is if you end up doing a full-length album, it'll be one that you want to listen with a good pair of headphones, and you want to listen all the way through. That it's going to be not about the individual songs. It'll be more about kind of the journey that album takes you on.
Absolutely.
So I have one final question to wrap up a few things, and then I like to do a rapid fire section to give the fans what they want. So you've had a lengthy career in the music industry. It's probably over 3 decades now. How do you keep this fun after all this time? Most people hate their careers after this long. How do you keep this fun? And what do you account for your longevity?
Well, I don't know, but I account for my longevity from just still being alive, I guess. I think you're confusing long with lengthy. There's been a lot of inactivity.
Hey, you're still making great music. You're still,
But as apart from, I'm not a young man, and but one good thing about getting old is I get better at music. I think right now I'm playing guitar better than I ever have. I wish in my 30s I had the drive to be a better guitar player the way I do now. but the other thing is, my obsessive love for music has not dimmed at all. I you know I love music. I'm a music snob. I carefully curate what music I listen to. I can't stand. I love country unless as long as it's before 1979. I hate almost all
That's a very specific cutoff. Yeah.
top 40 stuff. As I get older, I'm more of like a songwriter guy. I love John Prine and Chris Christopherson and Bob Dylan, and I just, like I said, I'm still obsessed with music. I've been listening to this old Fleetwood Mac song called "Hypnotized" obsessively for about 3 weeks now. I think I've heard it 100 times, and I can't hear it enough. Um, I just always want to discover new music and listen to new music and play music, and yeah, it's just all I can. I'll never be tired of music. And, I call myself a degenerate musician because I'm like my key to longevity is I have a low nut, so I'm able to like scrape by with like making peanuts on producing and a little bit of songwriting income and some little local gigs here and there. So
So rapid fire questions. So some short questions, short answers. What would you be doing if you didn't become a musician?
uh when my dad wanted me to be an accountant, I wanted to study math at Waterloo. He said, "Math? What's that?" And I think, like, if I'd done that, maybe I'd have my dream job right now, which would be like a working analytics for the Toronto Raptors.
That's a good answer. What would you change about the music industry? And I know that shouldn't be a short rapid fire answer. We could do a whole other 2-hour interview with just that, but
Everything. I would this show called The Voice. I've never watched that, but the idea of like taking your looks out of it would be a great thing.
what were some of your favorite venues to play at?
The Marquee in Halifax, the immortalized in the Sloan song, Marquee and the Moon, the Starfish in Vancouver, the Rivoli in Lee's Palace in Toronto, Mercury Lounge in New York, and any outdoor festivals. It always sounds so great. I played a couple fairly big outdoor festivals with my cover band in the last couple of weeks, and it's a blast when your sound isn't constrained by walls.
Yeah. What's the biggest show that you've ever played? I'm assuming it would be with Treble Charger. And what was it like to play to a crowd that size?
I'm trying to think. That first Tragically Hip show, even though the crowd wasn't there, it was pretty big. I can't even think of like the biggest, because that never.
Probably some summer festivals or something.
Well, and even the summer festivals, either we were so early on the bill that there wasn't very many people in the venue, or we were on the side stage. So I don't really remember any giant shows like that. Although I do actually, sorry, the opening the ACC, the Tragically Hip played 2 nights, New Year's and New Year's Day, and we were on the first night. It was before we had in-ears, and I was singing Red to a full house at the ACC, and I could hear my voice filling the arena, and that was very thrilling.
Wow. Which band were you the biggest fan of before opening for them? So maybe it's the Tragically Hip we keep coming back to, but or I guess you kind of knew them before you opened. So maybe.
We opened for the Posies in the summer of 1995, and their album Frosting on the Beater is amazing, and we got to hear them play almost the whole album every night, and it never got old. No matter what kind of shape you were in after your gig, you were going to go watch that entire show. We also opened for this band called Swell that I was really into. toured through the southern US. Yeah, I would say those.
What's the best live concert you've ever seen?
I saw Tom Waits in Massey Hall during his amazing run in the 80s, the Frank's Wild Years tour. Probably the best sounding show I've ever seen. I saw Bob Dylan about 5 years ago. That was amazing. And I saw Tom Petty on his last tour. And that was Waterworks. It's funny because I was talking to Mitch Bowden from Don Vale afterwards. It's like I couldn't stop crying. He said, "How could you not?" And I was like, "Yes, Mitch, you understand."
Someone gets it. Did you ever get to a point where you seriously considered quitting the music business?
No, that would be like quitting breathing.
If you could sit down with anyone, living or dead, for a conversation, who would it be? It's a tough one.
Yeah, Bob Dylan. Gord Downie. One more conversation with Gord Downie would be nice.
Yeah, those are two good choices. What are the things outside of music that bring you joy?
Cooking, swimming. Went last year and this year, but hopefully we're going to do this every year forever. 3 high school buddies and me drove up to Lake Superior and go to this beautiful beach and swim. And at the time I was thinking, like, the Sault Ste. Marie, if you look at the 10 worst places to live in Canada, Sault Ste. Marie's top 10, but we are between the twin goddesses of Lake Superior and Lake Huron. And so I love swimming in the big lakes.
If you somehow ended up on death row, I mean, you didn't do it, you're falsely accused, but you have one final death row meal, what do you choose?
Maybe the favorite things I like to cook: beef short ribs, trout rillettes. Yeah, I don't know.
Any dessert in there? Are you a sweets guy or what?
Probably chocolate mousse.
Not bad, not bad. When this is the final question for the rapid fire. When you find yourself in a rut, what do you do to snap out of it as quickly as possible?
Oh, that's a tough one.
Cry and eat chocolate mousse? No, that's just me.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm a big I love singing. Like, I have a cover band called All the Tired Horses, and we played nuggets. We don't play hits. Throughout my career, I've found that when you sing other people's songs and you get out of your comfort zone, and you discover so much about music and what you know and what you don't know.
I have three final questions. These are a little bit deeper, so you don't have to rapid fire through them. Man, you've had such a long, illustrious career, lots of accomplishments. Do you have any musical dreams that you still have in your heart that have yet to come to fruition, that you're still working towards, or that are still on a bucket list?
Well, I mean, since leaving Treble Charger, to me, being a touring musician, it's rough, it's difficult, but playing all the time like that, there's nothing like it. So I'm constantly mourning the fact that I'm not a full-time touring musician anymore. And but I haven't given up. That maybe that. So anyone watching, if I'm an amazing sideman, I'm a good band leader. I arrange harmonies and I know how to play support. I love, one of my favorite things is just getting out of the way and supporting songs and playing rhythm and yeah.
Well, from all these interviews, there's quite a few musicians that are looking to still tour. So Rich Bedeau, the drummer for Finger 11, he He's free as well. So we're going to put together a super group from this podcast. When you look back on your life and career, what are you most proud of and what are you most grateful for?
Oh, I'm most proud of writing and recording songs. There's nothing like it. And I'm most grateful for people listening. And I never got into this to be famous. Being famous is I didn't like it. I didn't like strangers recognizing me in Toronto. I may have liked it for a minute, but yeah, I'm grateful. And it's, people talk differently about music these days. In my day, everyone was kind of an asshole, and nowadays everyone's about being grateful, but all that language is correct. One of my favorite writers, Kurt Vonnegut, he had one of his characters was a drummer, and they played songs for people, but every once in a while we would sneak in what we really loved, which was jazz. And when we played that, I was in ecstasy. And pretty much any live thing that I do, I'm in ecstasy. So I'm just always grateful for the opportunity to play in front of people.
Final question. If you could go back in time and you could sit down next to your 10-year-old self, so you have your lifetime of experience, of mentorship, lessons, highs and lows, what advice do you give cute little Bill sitting there to help guide him through this life?
Geez, I don't know. I would say play more guitar, listen to more music, put yourself, well, I kind of got there, but put yourself in a position where music is everything.
That's good advice. Where can our listeners find you on social media? Maybe they want to reach out and say, hey, I'm looking forward to the new album, or they want to say how much the Treble Charger music means to them. Where do they reach out? Is it Instagram? Is it Facebook?
I'm easy to find on Facebook under my own name. Yep.
Under your own name. There you go. So as we wrap up, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge you for your lifelong pursuit of mastery as a singer, as a songwriter, as a guitarist. I want to acknowledge you for having the courage to come from a small town and dream big and follow that through to fruition. Gold and platinum albums and top singles and Juno nominations. You show the rest of us musicians what is possible when you actually commit to that. I want to thank you personally for all the incredible music that you've created. Some of the Treble Charger music is the soundtrack to my teenage years. I still, I'm a musician. I play open mics, and I just started learning Red because it's one of my favorites. So I'm getting kind of the inside scoop on one of my favorite songs here today. And last but not least, just as a fan, I want to thank you for sitting down with me for the last 2 hours, so I can pick your brain as a fan, all the questions I've wanted to know answers to for a long time now. So I really appreciate it. Thank you, Bill.
Thanks, Joel. I really appreciate you having me on here. You've had some heavyweights on, so I'm honored to be in their company.
You're very welcome. So to the podcast listeners, to the Bill fans, to the Treble Charger fans, all the other projects he's been a part of, thanks for sticking with us for the last couple hours, and we'll see you on the next episode.
All right. Cheers.
If you've enjoyed today's episode of the podcast, please take a moment to subscribe, like, comment, and share. What I want to know is, who would you like me to sit down with next for a 2-hour deep dive interview? You can let me know by reaching out to me on social media. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at Joel Martin Mastery. Joel is Joel. And you can find me on Twitter and Snapchat at Joel Mastery. So I am done. I am complete. I approve this message, and I'll see you on the next episode.